Hi everyone, my name is Paz. I'm the country manager at Too Good To Go, and I'm really excited to get the chance to speak to you as part of the Festival of Climate Action. I really wanted to spend a bit of time talking to you about fighting food waste and the practical steps we can take to make a big difference. Of course, I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Too Good To Go, but there's no hard sell here. It really is a case of sharing where we are, our knowledge, and the tips and tricks as to what you can do today to fight food waste. So first, a short introduction. So my name is Paz. I have what I like to think of as an interesting history. I've worked in restaurants and retail for the last 17 years. I've worked for some of the big high street names, such as Carluccio's, Giraffe, Pizza Express. And then in the retail world, I was looking after View Cinemas retail and all the popcorn and cola you could possibly imagine. And through that experience, I gained a lot of knowledge as to what it takes to run these businesses at scale, businesses that deal with masses of food. And one of the things that was always in my mind is, how do I make a difference? How do I affect climate change through that knowledge? And one thing I missed saying in that intro is that the 3 years prior to this, I was lucky enough to follow my dream and set up a restaurant business of my own, an ethically sourced and award-winning burger restaurant. And I was the chef, I was the man who fixed the lighting, and I did everything in between as well. So I'm lucky enough to have had quite a lot of experience in kitchens as well as the operations and marketing and management. So all of that led me to where I am today. At Too Good To Go. I had a moment where I decided that the rest of my working life would be spent working to fight climate change, and I found the wonderful people at Too Good To Go, and I'm part of this journey now that we're on. So today it really will be a case of me sharing a few of my stories and a little bit of knowledge with you. I will give a little bit of background on Too Good To Go just so that we can get things moving and understand where I'm coming from. Too Good To Go is a social impact company, and what we do is we fight food waste. We're very singular in our approach. That's everything that we do day in and day out. Of course, we are an app, we are an enabler, a simple enabler for a complex problem, and it can make a really big difference. We'll get onto some of those stats very soon. But alongside our app, we also do a number of other things. We actually have a movement around food waste. We try to spark policy change, we try to educate, and we try to guide public affairs. As I said earlier, we are a simple solution. We are a really nice little simple app that you can put on your phone, and it gives a way for stores to sell their unsold food, their surplus, at the end of service. And it really is as simple as that. We're really lucky because through the hard work that our teams have put in, we are the world's largest food waste fighting app. We're active in 15 countries, including the United States. We have 60,000 partners globally and 28 million users. So far, we've been able to really make a difference, saving 50 million meals from going to waste. And that number is only the beginning. Our ambitions are huge, and we're looking to the future with very open eyes as to what we can do. A little bit of a background on Too Good To Go there, and I really now wanted to talk to you about the issue at hand, and that is the issue of food waste. When I was working in my restaurant, selling burgers to the London crowd, I knew that we had waste in our restaurant, but I didn't know how big the food waste problem is at a global scale. And the truth is that a third of all food is wasted. From farm through to fork, a third of everything we produce is gone. And that can't be right. It has a really big set of impacts. It has an environmental impact. It's directly responsible for more greenhouse gas emissions than the whole aviation industry. In fact, food waste accounts for about 8 to 10% of total greenhouse gas emissions. And that is really significant. Food waste has a huge social impact as well. That social impact is really around hunger and the fact that we waste 1.3 billion tons of food, and that there are 870 million people that go hungry every year. So again, that just can't be right. And finally, we mustn't forget the economics. And I think one of the interesting factors in all of this is that we are looking at solving a great deal of climate change issues through economics. And the economics of food waste are undeniable. Food waste costs us $1.2 trillion every single year. So there are many motivators as to why we should take action. I just wanted to put this into context for you. This talk is going to be about 17 minutes long. And in the 17 minutes that we'll be talking, and I'll be talking, and hopefully you'll be listening. I hope you're still there. In that time, we will be wasting 51 tons of food every second. That means that by the end of this talk, 52,000 tons of food has been wasted. And that just can't be the way that we go forward. We have to act, we have to do something now. And I'm going to talk to you about how we can make a difference, each of us and every day. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why food is wasted and give you a sense of where the waste comes from, and that will lead into the actions that I suggest later, the tips and tricks. So food waste is wasted across multiple elements. The supply chain is inherently inefficient at the moment. There is very little forward planning, and there is very little seasonal planning that really goes on here. Retailers have started to do something, but I can tell you from personal experience in the food services industry, there is very little long-term planning here. And inefficiency is just a lack of preparation in that case. There's pretty weak collaboration across the food chain. We're always talking price between vendor and recipient, and we're not necessarily talking about collaboration and making things efficient from a global climate-based perspective. There are definitely inefficient regulations. One of the huge challenges we have is that the economic models we have to manage climate change don't price carbon at the right level, something that I know the economists in the group will be thinking about regularly. But there are also insufficient regulations. Our infrastructure for managing waste is inefficient, and apps like ours go some way to help. And finally, and maybe most importantly at this stage, is that 2/3 of Brits don't recognise the link between food waste and climate change. And so there's a lack of awareness. In fact, I think we've gone backward here. So if I think back to my grandmothers, who were both in the food industry, both ran restaurants or were chefs, and were also heads of the household, they had a great understanding of the sense of not wasting food, eating seasonally, buying local. And I think we've lost that. And I'd like us to regain it. And that is through awareness and education. So the next thing I really wanted to talk to you is really a little bit about where food is wasted. And I think here we need to just get really clear, which is it's a whole value chain question. And what you are seeing on your screen is for the EU where waste comes from: production, processing, wholesale and retail, food service, and the biggest element is households. So when we work with our app, we're trying to impact as many parts of that supply chain as we can. Certainly wholesale and retail, certainly food services, and to some degree households. But education and awareness in households are the biggest drivers that can make a difference. At this point, I just wanted to take a moment of reflection on what wasting food means, and really get into a little bit more detail around resource and thinking not only when we waste food, do we waste the carbon that's in it, do we waste the energy and the effort of making that food, but we also use up valuable resources within it. We use land. A stat here that might help get some sense of this is that 40 football fields of trees are cleared every minute around the world, primarily to make way for food production. And in terms of that change of use of land, we're losing biodiversity, and we're losing a great deal in that change from wild land to food production and agriculture. There's a huge amount of labor that goes into every gram of food that we make as well. Some of that labor more ethical than others, and there are issues that we want to deal with in that space. The use of fertilizers is still very prevalent. There are 28 million tons of fertilizers used to grow food that we waste. That's just the food that we waste, not the food that we eat. So 28 million tons of chemicals and fertilizers. It's 19% of the total fertilizer production in the world is used on food that is wasted. The water story, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story that I tell my children now around water, to give them a sense of why food is just so valuable. Water is going to be a scarce resource in the 21st century, and I'm sure you've all heard this, but we use masses of water in the production of food, and I'll give you a little example in a moment. There's the fuel for transportation, the electricity for refrigeration, and again, I can tell you as an ex-restaurateur, there are huge costs associated with that refrigeration. But do we really need it? Do we need to store food in that way? Do we need to use the electricity to keep things refrigerated? There are many questions here, but in essence, what we're saying is food waste is a waste of resource. And I said I would tell you the story that I tell my kids, and this really brings it home for them, and hopefully it will do for you. And that is, every time we throw away a banana, the water that banana has used in its production would mean we could shower for 10 minutes. So throw away a banana and think of a shower head running for 10 minutes. I think that's a mad statistic. And what it means for us at home is that we're very good now at using bananas, no matter the brownness, to good effect. And in fact, one thing I will direct you to is, if you do follow us on Instagram, I'd love for you to do that if you could. Too Good To Go on Instagram is a great page for tips and tricks, how to act against food waste. One of the tips that we have on there is all around what to do with your bananas in different shades of yellow to brown. And I think it's a really exciting thing to make banana pancakes and banana breads with your kids and friends. And I'm sure that they'll be thanking you for those tasty treats. And I'll be thanking you for the water that you've saved. So moving on from the whole concept of food waste, I just wanted to talk about where it goes. And the final destination of bio-waste in the EU is split down like this. There are landfills, incineration, and some recycling. I suggest the best thing to do with as much of the food that is produced as possible is to get it into people's bellies. Bellies and not bins is always the best solution. But it's good to understand where it goes within the EU and how that's sort of structured. And at this point, it is worthwhile just talking about landfill for a moment. There are short and long-term health effects that come from landfills. And we've seen statistics that prove that living close to landfill has a negative long-term health effect. Cancers, birth problems, and allergies can be caused by it. So increasing landfill, using up more space for landfill, is not a good thing for the populations that are close by. The other challenges with landfills are the way that it changes the water and the soil. Both organic and inorganic constituents really dissolve, and they form highly toxic chemicals that leach into the groundwater. All of these things are very difficult to deal with in short and long term. And then finally, landfills have a huge impact on climate, mainly from methane emissions. And the methane emissions are coming from those anaerobic decompositions of organic material. As we know, I'm sure you know this, methane is a very difficult greenhouse gas and a very potent one at that. So we really must protect against landfill. So again, we can make some simple changes that cost us very little and are ingrained in our population, then we can reduce landfill. At this point, I'm not sure how many people know this, and I really want to share it. Project Drawdown was put together to identify things that we can do today. It was done in March. It was released in March, the most recent review. And it looks at things that we can do to stay below 2 degrees in terms of climate and global warming. Now, I'm signed up to this idea that we can achieve these targets. And food waste reduction is highlighted by Drawdown as the #1 solution to combat climate change. So it seems mad to me not to be acting on this and not to be very, very quickly moving towards it. So keep that in mind, please, as we go forward. So look, I've given you some context, I've given you a bit of my personal story, but now it's time for the action part of the Festival of Action. And again, I just wanted to reiterate that these individual actions really can make a big difference. And when I talk about 50 million meals saved, it's only the beginning for Too Good To Go. And if I can talk about the influence that we have on all those customers that have interacted with us in terms of how they view food waste, I hope these actions really add up. So I've got 6 tips and tricks. I'm going to talk about these, a little bit of personal experience here as well. First and foremost, and I did know this when I was running my own business and chefing and cleaning, is plan ahead. And I do this at home as well now, and we've become better and better at it. We plan our meals, and planned meals and planned shopping really does make a huge difference. Fundamentally, it's about not buying things we don't need. And I think that we all can agree that if you don't need food and you don't buy it, then when you do, it's far tastier, far fresher, and far more enjoyable. So planning ahead. And it doesn't mean about a compulsive meal planning or preparation. It just means having something on your phone or on a piece of paper that keeps you up to date with what you need in your fridge. The second is about ugly produce. A huge amount of the waste that comes from the farm is around produce that doesn't fit the requirements of retailers or food supply chains. And so we really want to show love to ugly produce. There are many ways to do this, whether it's buying at local farmers markets or buying boxes of products that are collated from this, as it were, reject bin from the farms. But anything you can do to show love to ugly produce is fantastic. And again, you can access great ideas and recipes on our site, things like broccoli stalk, guacamole, and the like, where you really are using every part and also showing love to these ugly produce. The third tip is understand your labels. So here's a pop quiz for everyone. Do we know the difference between a best before and a use by label? What I can tell you is that 10% of all the food wasted is down to date label confusion. 20% of Brits think a best before label means food cannot be consumed after that date, and that is simply not true. What we say is judge food on appearance past its best before date. Use your senses to understand whether that food is still good. A best before is simply a guide, and it's often set by brands for many reasons, but it's often set by brands as a worst case scenario. So that is really important for me, is understand your date labels, best befores are indications, use your senses and your brain to work out whether something is great to eat still. If you came to my fridge, you will find products in there that are past their best before and they taste wonderful, and my family still love to eat them. But that's an experience-based thing, and I'm sure you all have experience of doing that. So please do understand your labels. Storage and fridge setup. These are really interesting things, which as a household of 5 and a chef, I have to deal with day in, day out. We are accustomed to having a full fridge, and we quickly lose control of it. The best thing I did at my restaurant was getting that fridge down to the absolute bare minimum, and then you can control, and then you understand how the fridge is going. So setting yourself up properly in storage in your fridge is great. It is important to buy some items in bulk, but storing them in airtight containers in a smart way really does help give them longevity as well. Finally, the final 2 is reuse and repurpose. One of my favorite things in the world is getting a challenge as to how to reuse and repurpose food. Now, I'm also lucky because I have a wife who is an expert at it. She's very resourceful, and then she gets me to cook it. So she comes up with the ideas and I then cook them. But reuse and repurpose, I think there's a game show in there. I'd love to have Ainsley Harriott involved in it. So if anyone knows him, please get him in touch. But reuse and repurpose is really fun. It's inventive and it's different. There are some challenges because we are used to cooking by recipe, and those recipes require very specific things and very specific amounts. But a really good understanding of food and a really creative mind goes a long way to make some really fun dishes. Some of my best dishes have come out of need rather than planning. And then the final thing, of course, is the use of technology. There are fantastic solutions everywhere we look, whether it's smart fridges, menu planning apps, or using Too Good To Go. Technology is an enabler here. We have to search out, find, and then use to its maximum everything that we can. Those are my 6 tips and tricks. Hopefully they are of use and bring a smile to your face if you're already doing some of them, and maybe make you look and find for the ones that you're not yet doing. I just want to say at this stage, together we can achieve Too Good To Go's dream, which is a planet with no food waste. There's a long way to go, and it is a complex world to navigate, but we are getting there, and there have been some really wonderful mentions of food waste by very influential people lately, and I'm so happy to be part of this journey. I would love to connect with any of you that want to find out more about Too Good To Go, me, or just have a chat about what we can do in terms of taking action on climate. I've left my email address here on this final slide, so I just want to say thank you again. Thanks for taking the time, and I hope we can connect soon.